morning, students. So here I am with one more video of class 9. Today we are going to do a poem that is A Legend of the Northland by Phoebe Carey. So first, before we going through the poem, I would like to say something about the title of the poem, A Legend of the Northland. So first, you have to know what is legend. So legend is an old classical story which passed from generation to generation. পুৰণি কিছুমান সাধু যেটো এটা প্ৰজন্মৰ পৰা আনটো প্ৰজন্মলৈ পৰিচালিত হৈ থাকে. And Northland. So the story from the title we come to know that this poem is all about an old story of the ancient time. And the place to which the story belongs is Northland. So Northland is a place which is located in a distant area of North Pole. The exact place is not mentioned here in the poem, but we can assume that this particular place, Northland, is situated in the North Pole area. Okay, so polar areas are basically extremely cold areas. There is bitter cold going on, particularly in winter season. And what is the story of Northland? The poem is all about that. I would like to add one more thing. This particular poem is a ballad. So what is ballad? So ballad is a song. Gitor মাধ্যমেৰে কবিতাটা প্ৰকাশ কৰাটো কি বুলি কয়? Ballad বুলি কয়. And this particular poem is a ballad. You can say that this poem is a song. Through a song, the poet is describing the story of Northland. So Phoebe Carey is a woman poet, and she wrote this beautiful poem, Legend of the Northland, and she is narrating a story of that particular place. So let's begin the poem. Before going to the poem, I would like to say something about the introduction of the poem. The poem narrates the legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. What is the poem? What is the story? We come to know from this particular poem is that the story of a saint. The name of the saint is Saint Peter. Saint Peter is the person of which the story belongs. And in this particular story, what we come to know is that Saint Peter was angered by an old lady. How that particular old lady angered Saint Peter and what are the consequence of that, the poem is all about that. Away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. So the first line of the poem is that the poet is telling about from where the story belongs to. It is away in the Northland, distant part of Northland. This particular incident happened. And significant of Northland is that where the hours of the day are few and the nights are so long in winter. So one more significant of Northland is that during winter season, the nights of Northland is quite long and days are extremely short. So that is the reason they cannot sleep them through. The nights are so long that the people not able to sleep throughout the day. There's two more reasons why they cannot sleep throughout the night is that first of all, the nights are quite long, and another thing is that in winter season there is bitter cold in Northland, so that is why people are often disturbed due to that particular cold, and they're not able to sleep throughout the night. Where I harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bear's cubs in their funny, furry clothes. So one more thing is that since Northland is a place which bitter cold prevail in winter season, and there is a lot of snowfalls happen in Northland during winter season. So that is why to communicate, to go to distant places, the people of Northland used to apply sledges, and those sledges were run by her. So since there is a lot of snowfalls happening in Northland, people not able to walk through not communicate through vehicles, something like that. So they used to apply sledges, and those sledges are run by the reindeer. So what is reindeer? So reindeer is a kind of animal which apply in communication in snowfall areas. So reindeer can move quite swiftly in snowy areas, and they wear harness. Harness means tied securely. So those reindeer were tied securely into the sledges, and through it the people of Northland used to travel around. And since there is bitter cold in Northland, so children used to wear quite heavy clothes, warm heavy clothes, and those were filled with fur. So that is why children look quite funny, because their entire body is covered by furry cloths. So from a distance they look like bear's cub. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it is true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. So the story which the poet is going to narrate about the story of Saint Peter, this is from Northland. So before narrating the story, the poet gives us a vivid description and brief description of Northland, to which the story belongs to. And according to the poet, the story which now she is going to narrate is a curious one, a very interesting and very curious kind of story. And still, the story is passed from generation to generation. It's a very popular story. Still, the poet don't think the story is true. So legends are generally not true. These are imaginary stories where a lot of fantasy and supernatural things happens, and that is why these things we cannot expect in our practical day-to-day life. So from that particular point of view, you can assume that the story of Northland, which the poet is going to tell us, it is not a real one, because personally the poet don't think so the story is real. But what is most important, although these legends are not true, these are imaginary, still people can derive a very good moral lesson from this kind of story. That is the main objective of such kind of stories, because these stories used to give us a very good moral lesson which we can apply in our practical day-to-day life. So as usual, this particular story, the legend, this is also going to give us a very good moral lesson, which is most important. Once, when a good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, you know. So the story, the central character of the story is Saint Peter. So Saint Peter is the epistle of Jesus Christ. That means he was the disciple of Jesus Christ. So being a disciple or epistle of Jesus Christ, what Saint Peter did, he used to spread the message of love and humanity among mankind. This is exactly Jesus Christ did, and being an epistle of Jesus Christ, exactly Saint Peter doing the same. He used to travel around, and in that way he spread the message of Jesus Christ among human beings. He came to the door of a cottage. In traveling around the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. So in that way, traveling around the world, finally Saint Peter came to the door of a cottage. And inside that particular door, a woman was making cake in her hearth. Juhalat teo cake bonaise. Hearth means fire. Jonan jikunu bostu bake koro bonao. Tak hearth boli koy. And that particular woman, here the woman is called as little woman. Little means not little in years, but she was quite little in height, or maybe she was quite short, kind of tiny kind of woman, and she was making cake in her heart. And being faint with fasting for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. So Saint Peter, since he was traveling around and he was walking actually, that is why he was very tired. The one more thing is that he was in fast. So Saint used to maintain fast. Because to become a saint is not a joke. Lot of dedication, lot of sacrifice, lot of hard work, a lot of soul force is needed to become a saint. So these are their discipline actually. They used to maintain such things in their life. Okay. So since he was in fast and he was traveling a lot, he was very tired as well as he was quite hungry. So when he reached the door of a cottage, when the woman was making cake inside the hearth, so when he got the smell of cake, he suddenly became more hungry. He did not able to control his hunger. So that is why he requested the woman to give him a piece of cake from her store. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it, and though it seemed too large to give away. But the woman was quite greedy and selfish. She was a kind of woman who not able to part with a single kind of thing. Okay, so that is why when Saint Peter requested her to give him a piece of cake from her store, so she looked at her cakes and she found them too big to give to a man, actually, to a person. Okay, according to her, her cakes are too big to be part with. So that is why she decided that I am not going to give these cakes which she had already prepared. And to give Saint Peter, she made another cake which is much more little than the previous ones. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one. But it looked when she turned it over as large as the first had done. So she made one more cake, which was very little one, to give Saint Peter. But when it time to give the cake to the Saint Peter, she found them equally big. So she not able to part with that small cake as well. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer. But she could not part with that. So she decided that no, I can't give this cake as well. I have to make another one. So she made a dough, and from that particular dough, she got a tiny kind of thing. And she rolled that particular tiny scrap of dough, and she made it as light as a wafer. Wafer is a very light kind of thing which float in air. And she made a wafer kind of cake. But interestingly, when she about to give that particular wafer kind of cake, she found it again quite big. So, lot of confusion going inside that particular woman's mind. Okay, the more she made smaller cakes, the more she found them big when it's time to give Saint Peter. That means she is too greedy and too selfish to give a single cake to that particular saint. For she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. So now the woman got confused within her mind. তেওঁ নিজৰ মনটোক নিজেই বুজিব পৰা নাই what exactly তেওঁৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত ঘটি আছে কি সেইকাৰণে তেওঁ কৈছে the woman talked to herself তেওঁ নিজকে নিজে কৈছে my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself যে মোৰ কেক বিলাক when it time to eat them myself I found them quite small but the same cake when it time to give it to someone else suddenly that cake become bigger it was ki that is a confusion going inside the woman's mind so why she found the cake big when it times to eat herself and the same cake when it time to give to that particular person or someone else she found them big because she was become blind her inward eyes become blind this is a sign of selfishness and greediness মানুহৰ স্বাৰ্থপৰতা মানুহৰ লোভৰ এইটো এটা হৈছে কি প্ৰতীক যেতিয়া মানুহ স্বাৰ্থত অন্ধ হৈ যায় যেতিয়া মানুহ লোভৰ অন্ধ হৈ যায় মানুহে এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ বলিয়াদিবিলাক কৰে this is exactly that woman was doing with Saint Peter and you can understand you can imagine what was going inside Saint Peter's mind at that point of time he was eagerly waiting for a woman that she will come out with a piece of cake and with that particular piece of cake he could have some energy strength and he could able to control his hunger but he was waiting but the woman is not came out of inside the house he was making cakes after cakes but every time she found her cake too big to part with then good Saint Peter grew angry for he was hungry and faint and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. So you can understand what was the mental state of Saint Peter at that point of time. So generally saints are quite calm and composed. They had a lot of patience because they are men with immense soul force and they had inner introspection as well. They could understand life, they could understand world and they always trying to do something which can help, which can give benefit to the entire humankind. তেওঁলোক বহুত ত্যাগ কৰিব পাৰে তেওঁলোকে বহুত কষ্ট কৰিব পাৰে তেওঁলোকে নিজৰ কাৰণে একোভাৱে তেওঁলোকে সদায় মানৱ জাতিৰ কল্যাণৰ কাৰণে তেওঁলোকে কাম কৰে কিন্তু তেনেকুৱা এজন ব্যক্তি এনেকুৱা এটা অৱস্থা যেতিয়া হৈছে গতিকে you can imagine even that kind of person can lose temper and become angry. So naturally, Saint Peter became quite angry with the woman because he was quite hungry and he was almost becoming faint due to his hunger. Or whenever we feel hungry, you can imagine when you were quite hungry and if you ask your mother to give something and if she's not able to serve things at time, we suddenly lose temper. Amar khongto potokke uthi ahe ka bhuke manhor patience to komai die hunger can reduce human beings self control and patience and this is exactly happened with Saint Peter the man generally calm and composed don't lose composure at any circumstance this particular woman's greediness and selfishness made Saint Peter quite angry and now he was going to do something aggressive with that particular woman and what will be that what Saint Peter is going to do with that particular woman and what consequence happened to woman's life after that we'll discuss in the next class. Thank you very much.